Hey booktube! Welcome to my channel, I am the Book Mage. As always, start of the year means so many new books coming out on the horizon. And as ever, I am in, like, little grabby hands, magpie mode. I see shiny new book, I wish to acquire said book. So that's what this video is. I'm going to talk about, I think, like 7 2024 releases that I'm, like, at least aware of and like know that they're coming this year. And like with last year's video, most of these I do have pre-ordered in one sense or another. So I'm just going to be letting you guys know the 2024 pretty much all fantasy, but I guess like sci-fi fantasy releases that are tippy top on my like hype scale, like the books that I personally am most excited for. Now I may have missed books, I may have like missed that certain books were coming out, I may have forgotten things. I'm trying to avoid things like sequels that are for series that I'm not caught up in. These are just the ones that I am just a little bit more sure about. So these are in like no particular order, they're just in the order that I thought of them in, not specifically release order, but I will put the dates on screen of when they're supposedly being released. The first one is Trials of Empire by Richard Swan. This is the third and I believe final book in the Empire of the Wolf trilogy, and I believe this one comes out on the 8th of February, which is so soon. I'm so excited. So with this being the final book in a series, I can't tell you very much about it. What I can say about book one, it's basically a fantasy murder mystery. You're following a justice who is kind of like a magical lawman. They travel about this fantastical empire enforcing the law upon the people, and they have certain unique magical powers that they can use to help them accomplish this. Wonderfully written, adult, grimdark, high fantasy. Book two branches out into so much more of like exactly the kind of fantasy that I personally like, so I am super hyped to see where book 3 is going to take us. The characters over this series have become so changed, they're very dynamic, and it's been great to see them evolve as well as like the story. This series has just shot up to one of my all-time favourite fantasy series as of this past year when I read the second installment, and I am just so excited to see where the hell book 3 is going to go. I am ready to have my heart rent from my chest. I'm not ready for it to end, but I need this book immediately. I will say, of all the books on this list, I believe this one is like my most hype. I think this is number 1 on this list because it's the first one I thought of. It's the book. Like, if I could only read one book next year, I think it might have to be this one. So fingers crossed, come February. Okay, so book number 2 on my list is The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. This one comes out, I think, on the 6th of February, so a little bit earlier, although I'm definitely going to have this on pause. Like, I can't pick this up with 2 days before Trials of Empire comes out, but like, it's one that I'm going to get to hopefully soon after it comes out. So this one I've also heard described as kind of like a fantasy murder mystery. It's supposedly like Sherlock Holmes inspired, but high fantasy, so I'm all here for it. The cover is also such a vibe. I also really like the American cover as well. If this had actual foils on it, I think it would be great, but I think this is just printed, to my knowledge. But also like the UK one has mushrooms, which so my vibe. So the basic plot from what I recall from this one is that an Imperial officer is found dead at a mansion when a tree suddenly just burst out of him, like grew out of his body, therefore killing him. Wild way to go. I'm very intrigued. And because of this, a duo of detectives is sent to investigate his very weird death. I get the vibe that this one is going to have like weird magic, possibly like maybe weird theology or maybe demonic stuff, I'm not entirely sure. I think I remember a mention of something called the Leviathans, which like, is this gods, is this demon, is this creatures, like what are they? I'm really interested to see this kind of genre mashup. I feel like most books do tend to have some sort of mystery aspect to them, but this one is like leaning full into murder mystery, Sherlock Holmes style investigation, like it's going full on into it with this fantasy setting, and I'm so interested in that. Definitely sounds like the kind of thing that might be something I enjoy if this ends up being like a pattern, and also mushrooms on the cover, 10 out of 10. Book number 3, I enter now my shame corner. It is Empire of the Damned by J. Kristoff, and this one comes out on the 29th of February. So February, busy month for me. 29th? Really? Is it a leap year? Really? So I have such a love-hate relationship with the first book in this series. It's high fantasy, adult high fantasy, grimdark vampires. Gothic. I had thought this could be my favourite book of all time. I think it was my most hype, most anticipated book ever, it just wasn't it. I think I gave it like a tentative 4 stars. Depending on what day you asked me, book 1 was either a 3 or a 4 stars. Just don't talk to me about it. Just do not talk to me about it. The thing is, the first half of the first book was like amazing, and I just feel like it really started to drag towards the end. The pacing was awful. I thought the characters got weird. I didn't really like the direction we took. But I'm thinking that given the events of the first book, the second book totally has a chance to redeem the series for me, and to, like, I'm not exactly sure what direction it's going to take things in. I feel like some of the issues I had with book 1 may not be present. I've waited for this book, this sequel, for such a long time now, just because I really need to know whether this series still has potential to be a potential favourite. Like, maybe the first book just wasn't that great. Maybe the second book is gonna like bring everything I want from this series. It so could happen. I feel like we're playing like Boo Boo the Clown music over me right now. I mean, the other option is that it comes out and it's mediocre, and I read 800 pages of mediocre J. Kristoff. So, I mean, feel free to place your bets. I'm trying not to get my hopes up. If you haven't really heard of this series, the basic kind of plot is that this is set in a world beset by like this vampire scourge. Essentially the world has been taken over by vampires. It is always nighttime, the sun never rises. You're following a Silver Saint, which is basically like a holy vampire slayer, and his name is Gabriel de Leon, and he's telling this story. It's kind of, everyone says it's like the Name of the Wind, where he is telling his story to another character who is listening to it, but it's based on Interview with a Vampire. And on that note, the third book of the Vampire Chronicles is called Queen of the Damned, and now we have Empire of the Damned. J. Kristoff, just let the woman rest. Yeah, it's grimdark, it's tongue-in-cheek, it's full of like sex and gore and violence and very sort of like almost campy, over-the-top, melodramatic gothic language. I just kind of really need to know from this book, like, this book is going to tell me if the rest of this series is like worth going on for. If this can get like a 4 or a 5 stars out of me, then I'll be happy. But I'm trying not to expect too much. Like, is this book going to be like the grimdark high fantasy vampires of my dreams? Or is it going to be like being in J. Kristoff's head again for the umpteenth time? Because I'm not all about that life. Still on my list, but like, I'm tentative about this one. If my camera angle keeps changing between takes, it is because my tripod is broken badly, so just ignore that. So the fourth book, again, kind of like the last one actually, it is The Sword Unbound by Gareth Hanrahan, and this is the second book in the Lands of the Firstborn series. And this one comes out on the 9th of May. I read the first book in this series, The Sword Defiant, because Gareth Hanrahan's other series, The Black Iron Legacy, is one of my all-time favourites, and if you've been around my channel before, you've probably heard me talk about it ad nauseum. I mention it like every chance I can get because I love it. This series I picked up because of just how much I enjoy his other work, and I'm caught up to date on that series, so like, I need something else. The first book, the kind of premise is that many years ago there was a band of like adventurers from all across this like big fantasy land that all came together. It's very like classic like fantasy, classic like almost like D&D party inspired, all sort of like coming together. And many years ago they defeated like this big evil, like the big bad that was like ruling over the land, and they took his like magical city and like his evil weaponry and then kind of all went their separate ways. And the book takes place many years after that. The main character is returning to this like kind of like evil magical city. It gives me like big Minas Morgul vibes, and he hasn't seen many members of his party for a long time, but he kind of knows that something is stirring, some sort of like great evil is returning, and he kind of has the idea that it might be time to like get the band back together. It doesn't quite work the same. They're all in like different positions of power and politics and responsibility, and nothing is as simple as it used to be. And also the main character has an evil talking sentient sword. I feel like this series had so much potential. I gave the first book like a high 3 stars, I think. I didn't get massively attached to any of the characters. Like, I like one side character and the talking sword. I suppose it just didn't quite resonate with me or like vibe with me the same way that Gareth Hanrahan's other high fantasy series does. I'm kind of interested to see where this one's gonna go. I'm not massively invested in a lot of the plot, I'll be totally honest. However, I am gonna go on to book 2, and much like the last one, I'm gonna see where book 2 takes me. And it could be, again, that because like I know this author, like I love so much of his other writing, so I know that he can write something that I personally really enjoy. It just might turn out to be that it's not this series, that this series is something different and probably appeals to like a different reader who isn't me. But also, I'm kind of holding out hope that I am that reader, and I will discover that in book 2. Okay, book 5 on my list is the Silverblood Promise, and this is by James Logan. This one, I believe, comes out on the 25th of April. So this one has a pretty striking cover. I've heard quite a few people like mention this, although I haven't actually seen any reviews of it. I've just kind of like heard the title enough times that it's just kind of like stuck in my head, and when I've checked it out, it sounds like it could be my kind of thing. So what I understand of the plot is that it follows the disgraced heir of a noble house who is working as like a bit of a con man, a card sharp, and he learns that his father has been murdered. So he takes it upon himself to solve the mystery of like his father's weird death. And I believe this is taking place in like a fabled like fantasy city. I do really like books, like I think I do tend to enjoy high fantasy books set in like fantastical cities as opposed to just like wandering around like the wilderness or like a giant map. I do like that as well, but I feel like sometimes like a contained environment can feel just so much more tangible sometimes. So if it's done well, I think that is something that I'm coming to realise that I do like when it's done well. That, and I am always fond of stories about like thieves and like rogues, and the main character is described as a card sharp but also like an academic dropout and like obviously like a disgraced noble heir, and I'm like, you know, a criminal with like a sad backstory, hand it over. Give them to me. So I will be reading this one. I believe this one is pretty chunky. It gives me chunky book vibes. I feel like when I only put like 7 books for the whole year on like my hypes list, I'm like, okay, I can fit it in, right? I can fit this one in. Book number 6 is the Fireborne Blade by Charlotte Bond, and this one comes out on the 28th of May. So again, this one is just, it's kind of a cover buy, because I'm pretty sure the artist is the same person who does the art for the Empire of the Wolf series, and like it's fantastic. I don't tend to like character artwork on covers, but there is a giant freaking dragon on this cover, so I will take that trade. Anything like blade in the title, like a cool knight lady on the front, dragon. I'm already signed up in my head, but if that wasn't enough, I believe this book follows a female knight who must regain her honour by retrieving a legendary sword from the dragon that guards it. So this book is going to have dragons, it has a sapphic romance, I believe it's going to have lots of plot twists. Like, it sounds kind of basic, but like there's nothing in this plot synopsis that I do not like, so this is definitely one which you are going to see in one of my future hauls. And lastly but certainly not least, now this is the one book on this list that does not have a concrete release date, but I believe the author has said, or at least I've heard it said, that this book is coming out in 2024, just doesn't have a concrete date yet. God, I'm hoping it comes out this year. And it is A Cure for Living by Nicholas Litzau. Now, this is the cover for book 1, because I don't believe there is a book cover for book 2 yet. But this is the second book in the 12th World series. I originally picked up book 1 on a whim, complete whim, because of the cover art. It gave me like cosmic horror meets like Morrowind, like the Elder Scrolls kind of vibes, and I was so right. I don't know what about this cover made me think of like earlier Elder Scrolls games, but this series started out life as a mod for Oblivion, which is the 4th game in the Elder Scrolls like video game series, and it became most popular as the Enderroll mod for Skyrim, which is the 5th entry in the Elder Scrolls game series. The first book, you're following a man named Jaspar. He again is like the son, the heir of this like I think kind of noble household, and he used to be a mercenary, but he's been given essentially like a letter of potential employment. His services have been requested in this like remote tropical archipelago by the wife of like one of the wealthiest men to ever exist. So wealthy he's almost thought of as like a demigod. The main character has travelled out there and is basically going to see like what these people could possibly want from him specifically. I thought this series had such a really well realized world. It feels like reading this feels like when you're walking about in like Oblivion and you overhear conversations like when you're passing like the townspeople, like the shitty AI, but in a good way, and like you can hear them talking about like other little things going on in like distant provinces, or like other little things that might become like quests later, and that is just how realized this world feels. Like I can tell that there are other places that we've yet to go, and I'm really excited to see them. I'm interested to know like where book 2 is going to take us. The character has such an interesting past. It is a very character driven book in that all of the characters in this are so horrifically flawed. Like one of my favorite things about this series is just that a character will be told exactly the correct way to progress in any number of things. Like it could be high stakes, it could be very low stakes, and they will just choose for very selfish reasons to just do something else. They will justify it to themselves, and it's like, as a reader, you're like pounding your fist on the table being like, you were told exactly the correct way to get like the good outcome of like any number of situations, and so many of them, for like their own shitty reasons, the characters just constantly fail. And like any time when something goes wrong, or almost any time when something goes wrong in the first book, it is so clearly a result of the character's own actions. I love it so much. I really love that kind of character, and like the main character. They're so interesting to me. It's so different from the way that so many other people write main characters, and I know not a lot of people might, I don't know, feel the same way as me, but I love the main character. I really like the kind of almost, it's not quite cosmic horror, but like there's little dribs and drabs of like almost like cosmic horror-y kind of plot points in there, and parts of it are like creepy and grotesque, and the characters have so much like past trauma. I don't know anyone else who's read this and liked it as much as me. It wasn't quite a 5 stars for me, but it was like a 4.5. It was like a high 4 stars for me, and I adored it. I read it in a few days. I really just want to read more books about shitty main characters who just can't fucking do anything right and just make everything worse. Like, I need it. I think this might be like my favourite indie published series, and it's hard to say because like there has only been one book, and I've been waiting for book 2 for a couple of years now. It's always been on like my most hyped list, so like I'm so hoping it really does come out this year. It really will be like a top priority for me when it does. I hope there's like a nice hardback version with like more bestiary stuff in it, or like more cool maps, or like just more little extra like little bonus stuff. It's all kind of a bit like tenuous. There's not a lot of information, but like I'm praying that it comes out this year. So those were all the books coming out in 2024 that I am the most excited for, the most hype, the most ready to get my grubby little magpie hands on. Do let me know if any of these books are also on like your top most hype, most anticipated books of 2024. And like, is there anything that I've missed? Is there anything that I've just like egregiously overlooked? Anything that like I should be excited for? Maybe that you're excited for? Like maybe I've just missed it. Maybe I've just like not heard about something. So also let me know, like, is there any book that's not here that you guys are also super excited for? Any of like your most anticipated releases for this year? And on that note, let's make the emoji for this video the little "my money is flying away." Oh god, my money. I can't tell if it's a privilege or a detriment that like I have a lifestyle where I can spend all of my money on books. Good for me because I like books. Bad for every other aspect of my lifestyle. So that was it for today's video. Fingers crossed you guys are reading something great to kick off the new year, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!